My presentation this week will be on the use of music therapy as a therapeutic modality for the treatment of sexually abused children. Every year, more than 3.6 million referrals are made to child protective agencies involving more than 6.6 million children. The United States has one of the worst records amongst industrialized nations, victimizing on average between 4 and 7 children every day to child abuse and neglect. The issue of child sexual abuse is an issue that has received considerable public attention. Sexual abuse is just one example of childhood trauma at the hands of an abuser. According to the article titled "The Use of Music Therapy in Treating Sexually Abused Children," 4 German studies examined the prevalence of childhood sexual abuse and found that every fourth or fifth woman up to the age of 16 was the victim of sexual abuse once in their lifetime. Another study found that girls are predominantly sexually abused by a family member, while boys are most commonly sexually abused by a non-family member, known to the child. Sexual abuse in children is typically discovered in primary school, where children develop a trust relationship with their teachers and begin to tell stories or draw pictures that depict a possible sexual abuse incident. Once teachers become aware of a probable abuse situation, they are considered to be mandated reporters and are required to report the incident to the appropriate agency. Sexual abuse is particularly traumatic to children, as it is manifest as a perceived destruction of the relationship between a child and a person who they trusted. According to the article, sexual abuse is one of the most terrible experiences that a child can suffer. The act of child victimization is a planned and conscious act, often repeated against a child who is in a powerless position. A central point in the definition of sexual abuse is that a child is not allowed to discuss the abuse and is sworn to secrecy. The child is therefore in a state of silence. The article that I chose to review discusses the utilization of music therapy as a therapeutic modality to develop a trust relationship with the child, and thereby break the silence. This is an attempt to help the victim deal with the traumatic violence which they endured. The article sets out the therapeutic framework and describes in detail a case study relating to a child named Kelly. This particular case is not one that is characterized by a child victim whose reaction to abuse is manifest predominantly in destructive behavior. Kelly in this case study reacted to her abuse by conformance, loss of vitality, and suppression of feeling. The therapist describes in 6 scenes the methodology by which she was able to reach and gain the trust of Kelly, utilizing music as a treatment modality. Once the trust relationship was established, Kelly was able to discuss her trauma, her resultant negative self-image, and her attribution of personal guilt. This is in stark contrast to Kelly's previous response to therapy, in which she rarely spoke. Through the modality of music intervention, Kelly became more and more interested in discussing her experiences, her thoughts, and her feelings. As a background summary, the therapist described Kelly as being invisible. Specifically, she is described as being cute but sad, and behaves as though she tries not to be noticed. Kelly was abused by her mother's partner, who touched her inappropriately while Kelly was sleeping in the bed between her mother and her mother's partner. Her mother stated that she was unaware of the abuse that was occurring, and initially did not believe Kelly. Several sexual assaults took place over a period of time. The partner had previous convictions of possession of child pornography prior to meeting Kelly's mother. The description of each of the 6 scenes explains the progression that music therapists took Kelly through in order to analyze her, gain her trust, and to stimulate meaningful dialogue. The progressive therapy sessions, as detailed in the following 6 scenes, are a classic illustration as to how music can be used in therapy in order to reach victims of child sexual abuse. The therapist describes Kelly's actions in this scene as being characteristic of the behavior of sexual abused children in early stages of music therapy. Kelly remains distant and non-communicative. She tries out all of the instruments and only allows the music therapist to watch, but not participate. This is the beginning of testing Kelly's trust of the therapist. Kelly is establishing her own sense of security by establishing the fact that she is in charge and she will decide what instrument will be played, and in what order. Kelly excludes the therapist from any interaction and thereby demonstrates that, at this point, closeness and the relationship with the therapist are prohibited. In this scene, Kelly talks very little, and her playing of music slowly becomes calmer. She starts playing a tune on the recorder which she learned from school. The song is called Buzz, 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 which is about a bee that is traveling and should have no worries. There is an element of fear that something might happen, present in the song. In the beginning, Kelly plays the song in an unpleasantly loud way. The therapist is only allowed to listen and not play an instrument. The therapist, however, breaks ground by humming along, thereby letting Kelly know that she is familiar with the song. In this manner, this song could be used as the beginning of the development of a secure experience for Kelly. This song, and a few others that are followed, form the basis for the starting point for Kelly and the therapist to communicate, and repeatedly played and utilized in the follow-up sessions as required. This scene is described by the therapist as an reenactment of traumatic relationship patterns through musical intervention, effectively making fright perceptible. This scene includes a substantial component of play acting. Kelly likes using particular instruments called a monochord, and she establishes a safe place near the instrument where she can play sleep. Kelly lies down and asks the therapist to wake her up by playing specific instruments in a loud manner. She requests a loud playing on the triangle, cymbal, and drum. The therapist states that this game play transpired over several therapy sessions, and makes the connection that this play acting is a reflection of Kelly's fear that something might happen to her at night. Play involving sleep becomes a central theme throughout Kelly's musical therapy session. Sleep insecurity is an obvious area of primary concern to Kelly. By way of music therapy, Kelly is demonstrating through a reenactment traumatic relationship patterns. When Kelly is asleep, she feels that she is not in control and expresses her concern that no one was looking after or protecting her. The crashing cymbals are a play representation of the shock and overwhelming experience that she had, similar to the fright that she experienced when the perpetrator violated her. The therapist points out the interesting fact that Kelly is putting her in a dual role. On one hand, the therapist is the one who's asked to deliver the loud sound, crashing and overwhelming wake-up noise, but is at the same time being asked to watch out over Kelly during her sleep. This is a dichotomy between these two roles, one being harmful and the other being helpful. Although the article does not make mention of it, there is clearly progress being made here in terms of Kelly testing the therapist as a person with whom she can develop a future relationship of trust. In this scene, Kelly begins to establish a relationship with the therapist by allowing her to restrictively accompany her in the playing of the theme song. The therapist must not play freely, and she must follow Kelly's instructions. At times, Kelly plays the theme song interacting only with herself on two different instruments. This is Kelly's theme. She can play it herself. She repeats it in certain variations, thereby being a confirmation that this theme is of her own creation. The therapist describes this musical play acting as Kelly's developing ability to participate in self-reflection thinking. At one point, the therapist states that she mirrored the theme using another instrument, playing a slight variation with more power. This is described by the therapist as musical mirroring, which demonstrates Kelly's emotions, but it is a bit different due to its content and its sound level. In this play acting, Kelly ties a number of scarves together and gives the therapist one end of the string of scarves and asks the therapist to tug on the end in order to wake Kelly up. Kelly also listens to music during her sleep, which now gives her security that someone is guarding her during her sleep, that person being the therapist. Kelly utilizes this new sleep play acting protocol in the scene by establishing her own space, subject to the fact that the therapist is now being utilized as external security that can be summoned upon demand by simply tugging on the string of scarves. In this scene, Kelly chooses the ocean drum as her preferred instrument, and accompanying Kelly, both the therapist and Kelly play their music louder and louder, and both shake their instruments. At one point, the therapist begins playing quieter, and Kelly follows only to start playing louder again. After this interplay, Kelly explains that she was never allowed to be loud and boisterous at home, and was always accused of being a stupid and bitchy girl. Kelly then spoke very negatively about herself. This play acting represented to the therapist a testing as to whether Kelly could handle lust, power, and uncontrollable feelings with the capacity to regulate. The therapist is assisting Kelly with this regulation. This experience is described by the therapist as the beginning of an actual dialogue where Kelly describes her feelings, including her negative self-image, her attribution of guilt by her mother, and her mourning of the loss of her real father. The therapist summarizes the fact that music therapy is a flexible medium that can be effectively used in the interaction between the child and the therapist. Music therapy establishes a relationship structure that allows the therapist and the abused child to work their way through traumatic sexual abuse experiences. Music therapy concentrates on the fact that sexual abuse victims have difficulty with withdrawal. That is, they are stuck in silence, they yearn for safety, and they are unable to deal with their internal feelings and are restricted in their capacity of mentalization. That is, the ability to cognitively deal with one's own feelings. The therapist then lists a number of ways in which she utilizes music therapy to work with sexually abused children. These are: music is used to overcome silence. Music establishes a safe space for secure experiences. Music is used as a medium to deal with problematic themes. Music is a way to mirror emotional experiences. Music is a space where one can experience pleasurable experiences with no sexual connotation. Music can be used to reenact traumatic relationship patterns. Music is a medium by which traumatic emotions can be communicated. Music allows the victim to deal and work their way through unbearable experiences. Music is a safe space which allows the victim to experiment with new relationships. In summary, the effectiveness of music therapy is reflected in the article with respect to the actual experience of the victim, Kelly. Music therapy facilitated the therapeutic process by enabling her to reclaim her life, voice, and spirit. Music therapy drew Kelly out in communication and enabled her to express her feelings regarding the sexually abusive traumatic experiences she's endured. Thus, music facilitated the process of emotions and allowed Kelly to evolve. Throughout this article, we are shown how Kelly's defensive modes of expression were worked on musically and psychodynamically, resulting in more emotionally expressive and authentic sense of self by utilizing the healing potential of individualized music therapy. The following are the questions for discussion. 1. Assume that you are dealing with a child victim whose reaction to physical abuse is manifest predominantly in destructive behavior and aggressive vocalization, as opposed to Kelly, who retreated into silence and apathy. Based upon what you have learned in this presentation, how do you think that music therapy could be used as a therapeutic modality? 2. How would the construct of the music therapy change given that you are not dealing with a child that has retreated into silence? 3. Do you think that researcher has overstated the capacity of music to bring the child out of a state of silence and to develop a relationship with the therapist and thereby work through the trauma of sexual abuse? Please elaborate as to why you agree or disagree. 4. Why do you think music therapy works as a non-pharmacological intervention? What do you think is occurring physiologically?